My name is Claire Whitman, I'm 32, and I used to think family meant unconditional love. Turns out in my parents' house, love came with conditions, like a marriage certificate. When I divorced my husband, they didn't just take his side. They took my babysitting schedule too. We're not enabling single mother drama, Mom said, standing in front of the same porch I helped them repaint every summer. It wasn't just rejection. It was humiliation, church friends whispered. My little boy, Eli, asked why Grandma didn't want him anymore. But time has a strange way of flipping tables. Because 3 months later, my parents' mortgage defaulted. Their perfect house on the hill was about to be auctioned off, unless someone helped. And the only person with the money, skills, and cold resolve to do it was me. I used to cry in that house. This time, I was walking through its front door as the buyer. Subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from, because every voice that rises after betrayal writes the next story. You're not a wife anymore, Claire. You're a liability. That's what my mother said, standing in her kitchen like a queen at her judgment table, coffee mug in hand and pity in her eyes. My father sat quietly behind her, pretending to read the newspaper, his silence louder than her words. I stood there, Eli's backpack in my hand, still half-zipped. I just need you to watch him for 2 hours, I said. I have a client meeting downtown. Mom cut me off. You think we're your babysitters now? That's not our role. You made your choices, Claire. Maybe if you hadn't rushed into divorce, you wouldn't be juggling all this. I blinked hard, swallowing the sting. He cheated on me, Mom. Her expression didn't even flicker. That's between you and your vows. Eli tugged at my sleeve. Grandma, can I stay? She smiled faintly. Not today, sweetheart. Grandma has a bridge club. By the time I got back to my car, I was shaking. I called the client to reschedule, trying to sound professional while my voice broke on every other word. We'll have to go another direction, the woman said. Timing's everything, Claire. I hung up and sat in the driver's seat, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't just exhausted. She was invisible. That night, we went back for dinner, mostly because Eli begged to see Grandpa. The table was crowded with relatives, laughter bouncing off the walls like I didn't exist. Mom showed everyone photos of my cousin's newborn. The proper grandchild, she called her. The room erupted in adoration. I smiled mechanically, my fork scratching my plate as I whispered to Eli, You are enough, baby. Don't ever forget that. After dessert, Mom handed me a takeout box and said sweetly, Next time, call before assuming we're free. We have our own lives too. That's when my phone buzzed, a voicemail notification. I waited until we got home before playing it. Hey Claire, it's Jake Sullivan, a familiar male voice said. Haven't heard from you since that real estate conference last year. Listen, I'm handling a foreclosure case that could use a marketing touch. Let me know if you're still consulting. Jake. The one person who'd ever treated me like I wasn't defined by a last name or a ring. I smiled for the first time all day. Maybe this was the start of something better. Then I replayed the message, catching a detail I'd missed before. He'd said a foreclosure case, and the address he mentioned, it was on my parents' street. I drove past their house like a stranger with my name on the mailbox. The shutters were still the same pale blue I'd helped Mom choose when I was 16, back when she still called me her pride. Now I couldn't even slow down without feeling like an intruder. Jake's office was in a refurbished brick building downtown, the kind of place where ambition still smelled like fresh coffee and printer ink. He stood when I walked in, taller than I remembered, his smile familiar but cautious. Claire Whitman, he said. Didn't think you'd ever trade ad campaigns for foreclosure reports. I laughed softly. You'd be surprised what single motherhood teaches you about budgets. He gestured for me to sit. The desk between us was stacked with folders and forms, each stamped in thick red letters. Property possession pending. He flipped one open. We've got a few listings in your old neighborhood, he said. Figured you might know what kind of buyers we're dealing with out there. My eyes drifted over the file as he spoke, address after address, all within a few blocks of my parents' home. Then one line stopped me cold. Whitman Residence, 418 Bellevue Drive. For a moment, the words didn't register. Then my pulse kicked. Bellevue Drive, my parents' address. Jake kept talking, unaware of the ice crawling up my spine. These cases are tricky, older homeowners, balloon mortgages, you know the drill. I forced a small nod, my voice careful. Can I take a look at that file? just so I understand the demographic you're targeting. Sure. He slid it across the desk. It's a mess, honestly. Someone co-signed a loan they couldn't keep up with. Classic story. I stared down at the first page. The paper felt heavier than it should have. There it was, in black ink. Whitman Residence, Bank of Northcrest Loan Guarantee, $326,000 outstanding. I turned the page slowly, my breath catching in my throat. At the bottom, in neat cursive, was my father's signature. I hadn't seen his handwriting in months, but I'd recognize that looping D anywhere. The realization hit hard and fast. He hadn't just co-signed someone's loan. He'd co-signed his own. Jake noticed my silence. You okay? Yeah, I lied, closing the folder too quickly. Just seeing a lot of familiar names. It's strange. He leaned back in his chair, watching me with quiet curiosity. You ever go back to Bellevue? That street always felt like a postcard version of America. Guess even postcards fade. I tried to smile, but my lips barely moved. Yeah, I said softly. Some faster than others. When I left, the afternoon sun glared off every windshield in the parking lot. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Just a recipe she'd forwarded. No message attached. As if we were still pretending things were fine. I looked at the screen, then back toward the street that led home. The file's red stamp burned in my mind. Bank possession pending. And under it, my father's name, inking his own downfall. It smelled like lemon polish and denial. The same scent that used to mean Sunday cleaning and fresh starts now clung to the air like a cover-up. I told myself I was just dropping off some old boxes from storage. But really, I needed to see T, the house that raised me, the one that was about to crumble under secrets my parents refused to admit. Mom opened the door in her usual perfection, lipstick, pearls, and apron. Claire, what a surprise, she said, tone too bright. You didn't call. I figured I'd just swing by, I said, smiling like I wasn't here on reconnaissance. Found some of my old things in storage. Thought you might want to keep them. She hesitated, then stepped aside. Fine, but don't make a mess. Dad was at the kitchen table, glasses low on his nose, surrounded by papers. He flinched when he saw me. Didn't know you were stopping by. I won't stay long, I said, setting down the boxes. What are you working on? He shuffled the papers together too fast. Nothing important. Mom shot him a look sharp enough to cut glass. Just bills, Claire. Everything's fine. But the tension in the room said otherwise. Her hands moved quickly, hiding envelopes beneath a glossy magazine. I caught a glimpse of bold red print through the paper. Final notice. Still using lemon polish? I asked, trying to sound casual. Smells the same. Mom smiled tightly. Of course. Some things never change. She went on about church committees, her new casserole recipe, and the importance of appearance, her voice brittle with forced calm. But underneath every word, I heard the ticking of a clock. Eli tugged at my sleeve. Can I see Grandpa's office? Mom stiffened. Not right now, sweetheart. It's messy. Please? He said, already running down the hall. I followed before she could protest. Dad's office door was half open, the light flickering slightly. The desk was covered in unopened letters, all with the same angry red stamp. Final notice, past due, foreclosure warning. My stomach twisted. I picked one up, the paper crisp and heavy, the kind of envelope you can feel bad news through. Claire! Mom's voice snapped from behind me. Those aren't your business. I turned slowly. Neither was my divorce, but you made that yours. Her face hardened. Don't start. Before I could answer, Eli's small voice broke through the silence. He'd found a letter on the counter and was squinting at it, sounding out the words carefully like he was reading homework. Notice of sale, where he looked up, puzzled. Mom, what's that mean? The room froze. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad's eyes closed like a man bracing for impact. I took the letter gently from Eli's hand, reading the bold header again, the truth finally printed where even a child could see it. Notice of sale, Whitman Residence, 418 Bellevue Drive. The house that raised me was officially for sale, and for the first time, my parents had nothing left to hide behind. Not polish, not pride, not even love. Some people inherit houses. I bought mine back from Karma. Jake's voice on the phone was calm, professional, too calm. Claire, it's official. The Whitman residence is listed for auction. 10 days from now. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, pacing the narrow space between Eli's toys and the half-finished laundry. "You're sure?" he sighed. "Yeah, the bank notice went through this morning. They're behind by almost a year. It's public record now." My chest felt heavy. That house had been more than a home. It was my childhood, my shame, and my first lesson in how love can be conditional. Can I, hypothetically, bid without them knowing? Jake paused. "You want to buy your parents' house?" "I want to keep my son from watching his grandparents lose everything," I said. "Even if they wouldn't have done the same for me." "Then yes," he replied softly. "There's a confidential buyer option. I'll send the form." When the email came through, I just stared at it. Confidential bidder agreement, property, Whitman residence. The line for buyer name was blank, waiting for me to become something new. The quiet savior they'd never thank. I printed the form and sat at my desk, pen hovering. Was I doing this for them, or for me? A part of me wanted revenge, the poetic kin, where the uninvited daughter ends up owning the house that cast her out. But another part of me, the softer one that still remembered bedtime stories and backyard picnics, wanted to protect what was left of us, even if they didn't deserve it. "Mom?" Eli's voice came from the hallway. "Can we go to Grandma's soon?" I smiled sadly. "Not yet, baby. Not yet." When he went back to playing, I signed the form. My name looked small under the heavy legal print. I scanned and sent it back to Jake. He called a few minutes later. "You're in. The auction's next Thursday, 10 a.m. downtown courthouse. You'll need a deposit, but I can walk you through it." "Thanks, Jake," I said quietly, "and don't mention this to anyone. Please." "My lips are sealed," he promised. That night, I sat in bed scrolling through social media, trying not to think about the weight of what I'd just done. That's when I saw it in my mother's latest post. A photo of her standing in front of the house, arms crossed proudly, captioned, "Hard work pays off. Refinancing approved. Grateful for second chances and strong faith. Your blessed Dutard family home." Hundreds of likes. Comments are full of congratulations. My stomach turned. She was lying, not just to her friends, but to herself. She'd rather pretend to the world than ask for help from her own daughter. I stared at the screen until the image blurred. Then I whispered to the dark, "Enjoy your victory lap, Mom. In 10 days, you'll be standing on my front porch, and you won't even know it." Their pride was worth more to them than the roof over their heads. Jake's voice still echoed in my mind when I parked outside the old auto shop where my dad worked part-time now. The closed sign hung crooked, the paint on the door peeling just like his promises. I hadn't been there in years. The last time, I was a teenager bringing him lunch and begging him to come home before Mom got mad. Now I was the one showing up unannounced, carrying questions heavier than any meal. He looked up from under a car hood when I stepped inside. "Claire," he said, wiping his hands on a rag that was already dirty. "Didn't expect you." "I figured," I said, forcing a smile. "I just wanted to check in. Things seemed tense at the house." He nodded, avoiding eye contact. "Your mother worries too much. We'll be fine." "Dad," I said quietly, "I saw the loan documents." He froze. The rag dropped to the floor. "What?" "Jake showed me the foreclosure file. Your name's on it. You refinanced the house." His shoulders slumped like someone had just let the air out of him. "It wasn't supposed to go this way," he murmured. "It was just one more chance. A small investment. Something I thought could help us get ahead." "What investment?" He hesitated, then pulled out an old folder from his desk drawer. Inside were crumpled business proposals, a startup pitch for a car restoration app, all big dreams and bad math. "I wanted to make you proud," he said. "You've done so well with your career. I thought maybe, for once, I could show you I still had it in me." I stared at the faded ink, the shaky handwriting, the empty ambition. "Dad, you didn't need to prove anything." He gave a sad laugh. "You wouldn't say that if you saw the look on your mother's face every time your name comes up. She measures success by who claps the loudest at church." My eyes drifted to his wrist. The old watch I'd given him for Father's Day when I was 15 hung there, cracked and motionless. "Still wearing it?" I asked softly. He smiled faintly. "It doesn't tick anymore, but it reminds me of when time felt slower." I swallowed hard. "You could have told me about the loan." "I couldn't," he said. Your mother would have seen it as weakness. She still does. The sound of his words settled like dust. I stood there watching the man who'd once fixed every broken thing in the house, now too tired to fix his own life. Before I left, I touched the watch gently, the cold metal pressing against my fingertips. "You're still my dad," I whispered. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Later that night, I stopped by the house again, just to drop off groceries for Eli's next visit. The lights were on, voices muffled inside. I lingered near the porch window, half out of guilt, half out of habit. Mom's voice carried through the open crack of the kitchen window, sharp, cold, rehearsed. "If the house goes, at least Claire will see what failure looks like." I stood there in the dark, her words slicing through the quiet. For her, failure was losing the house. For me, it was realizing I'd never truly had a home. My mother once said forgiveness was for the weak. I was about to prove her right. Eli had been counting down the days to his birthday like it was Christmas, his excitement filling every corner of our small apartment. "Can Grandma and Grandpa come this year?" he asked one night while coloring balloons on construction paper. I hesitated, the question slicing through me sharper than I wanted to admit. "I'll invite them," I said finally, forcing a smile. "Maybe this time they'll surprise us." We spent the next day baking cupcakes and making handmade invitations, glitter glue, lopsided hearts, the whole childhood masterpiece. He wrote their names carefully in his uneven handwriting. "For Grandma and Grandpa, I'll be 6. I dropped the envelope at their doorstep myself, heart pounding like I was doing something dangerous. Mom opened the door before I could leave. "Oh," she said flatly, glancing at the card. "That's sweet. I'll put it somewhere safe." "Eli would love to see you," I said, trying to sound casual. "He misses you both." She waved a dismissive hand. "We're busy that weekend. Church event." Of course they were. When I turned to leave, I noticed the invitation lying on the counter behind her, right next to an unopened bill and a dried-up vase of flowers. Already forgotten. Back home, Eli ran up to me. "Did they say yes?" I knelt beside him, brushing his hair off his forehead. "They might be busy, honey, but we'll still have fun." He frowned. "Did Grandma forget my name?" The innocence in his voice broke something in me. "Never," I said softly, hugging him tighter than I meant to. "She just doesn't remember how to show love sometimes." That night after Eli went to bed, I sat alone on the couch scrolling through photos, birthdays, holidays, memories that now felt like fiction. Every picture had the same house in the background, the one that had defined my entire life. And now, 10 days later, it was about to be mine. Jake called just after midnight. His tone was calm but carried something electric beneath it. "Claire," he said, "I didn't want to wait till morning. Your bid was accepted." I sat there frozen, heart racing. "Are you sure?" "Completely. The house at 418 Bellevue Drive is officially yours." I pressed a hand over my mouth. The reality hit like thunder. I owned the home my parents had refused to share, the one they'd protected with pride and lies. Jake's voice softened. "You okay?" "I don't know," I whispered. I don't know what to feel." He chuckled gently. "You can figure that out later. For now, you won." When the call ended, I stared at the dark ceiling, tears stinging my eyes. I thought of Eli's forgotten invitation on that count, the small, colorful card that had meant everything to him and nothing to them. They didn't come to his birthday, but soon they'd be getting an invitation they couldn't ignore, signed by their daughter, the new owner of their house. When they opened the door, they were expecting mercy. I brought a lease agreement. The morning air felt unnaturally calm as I stood on the porch of the house that raised me. The same porch where I'd once learned to ride a bike, where I'd cried over scraped knees and teenage heartbreaks. Only this time I wasn't here as a daughter. I was here as the owner. Jake stood beside me, clipboard in hand, dressed in a gray suit that screamed authority. Behind him, the bank's representative, a tall woman named Ms. Heller, carried the official envelope containing the new title deed, the paper that would make this moment both legal and irreversible. I took a slow breath before knocking. The door creaked open, and Mom appeared, pearls around her neck, lipstick sharp as ever. Her smile froze when she saw Jake, then me, then the woman holding the documents. "Claire?" she said cautiously. "What's all this?" I met her eyes. "We need to talk inside." Dad appeared behind her, his face pale, holding a mug of coffee that trembled in his hands. "Is this about the bank?" Jake cleared his throat. Mr. and Mrs. Whitman, I'm here on behalf of the bank and the new property owner. He turned slightly toward me. Mrs. Whitman's daughter, Claire. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom blinked once, twice, her composure cracking like thin glass. You're joking. I pulled the envelope from Ms. Heller's hand and placed it on the table. No, I'm not. She tore it open, her hands shaking, scanning the words until they stopped on the red stamp at the bottom. Property of Claire Whitman. Her breath caught. You bought this house? I did, I said quietly. It was either that or let the bank auction it to strangers. I thought I'd at least keep it in the family. Mom's face went white. The mug slipped from Dad's hand, shattering against the tile. He grabbed the counter for balance. Claire, why didn't you tell us? Because you wouldn't have listened, I said. You made it clear that my life choices disqualified me from being part of this family. I just followed your rules, kept my distance. Mom swayed, one hand clutching her pearls. For a terrifying moment, I thought she might actually faint, and then she did. Jake lunged forward, catching her elbow as she collapsed into a chair. Get her water, Dad muttered, panicked. Please, just give us some time. Ms. Heller's voice was professional, almost too calm. Mr. Whitman, the transition period allows 30 days. After that, rent will be due or the occupants must vacate. I handed him the lease agreement, the papers shaking slightly in my hands despite my resolve. You can stay if you pay rent. Market rate. I'll give you 30 days to decide. Dad stared at me, eyes wide with something between shame and disbelief. Claire, we can't afford. Then you'll need to move out, I said softly. He turned to Mom, who was slowly coming to. Her lips trembled as she whispered, You'd evict your own parents? I met her gaze evenly. You taught me responsibility, Mom. I guess I finally learned. Jake gave me a subtle nod, signaling it was time to go. I followed him toward the door, my heart pounding, my mind screaming at me to turn back, but my feet didn't move. On the table behind me, the title deed caught the morning light, the ink still fresh, the stamp bold and undeniable. Property of Claire Whitman. They'd always said I'd never own anything of worth. Now they were living in it, on borrowed time. Reputation dies faster than mortgages clear. By the end of the week, our family name had gone from whispered gossip to full-blown neighborhood entertainment. The Whitmans, the respectable couple on Bellevue Drive, were now the cautionary tale people traded over coffee. Every porch light felt like a spotlight. Every passing car, a witness. Mrs. Yates, our 80-year-old neighbor who'd lived next door since I was a child, called me the morning the story hit. You did what needed doing, she said in her crackly but fierce voice. They built that house on pride, not love. It was bound to cave in sooner or later. I didn't want it to be like this, I said quietly. Child, she replied, no one ever does. But truth doesn't care about timing. That afternoon, Jake dropped off some paperwork at my office. Loan transfer receipts, the final property verification. He looked uncomfortable as he handed me a folded newspaper. I tried to get them to hold the story, he said, but it's out. On the front page of the Lakewood Chronicle, right beneath the local parade schedule, was the headline, Local Family Loses Generational Home Amid Scandal. The article was polite but brutal. It listed my name, the new owner, right below my parents. It mentioned ongoing community shock, and quoted an unnamed source saying the daughter's actions seemed both personal and punitive. I folded it shut, my throat tightening. They make it sound like I dragged them to the courthouse myself. Jake sighed. People love drama more than context. By the next morning, I could feel the stares at the grocery store. A woman I'd known since high school suddenly found the cereal aisle fascinating when I passed. Another whispered, "That's her," like I'd robbed a church. That evening, Mom called. Her voice trembled, not from sadness, but from anger. How could you let the neighbors humiliate us like this? I didn't write the article, Mom. Oh, please. You might as well have. You always wanted to make us look bad. I bit my tongue. I bought the house to save you, not ruin you. She laughed bitterly. Save us? By turning us into gossip. Congratulations, Claire. You've made your point. The line went dead. 2 days later, I walked into my marketing office and froze. A small crowd had gathered near the reception, my team staring at the glass doors. Outside, under the drizzle, stood my mother. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, her hands clutching a framed family photo. She was crying. loudly. Jake, who'd stopped by to deliver another set of forms, whispered, "Oh no." I stepped closer to the glass, my heart pounding. Through the door, Mom spotted me and held up the photo like evidence in a trial. "This is what you've done," she shouted. "You've destroyed your family for a paycheck." Phones were already recording. My receptionist tried to step in, but Mom brushed her off, tears streaming, voice trembling. "She's not my daughter anymore. She's a stranger who owns my house." Every word felt like a nail hammered into whatever was left of our family name. I wanted to scream back, to tell her I'd tried, but I couldn't move. She dropped the photo on the wet pavement. The glass shattered. As she turned away, her voice broke one last time through the rain. "You'll regret this, Claire. One day you'll know what real shame feels like." The cameras caught it all, and deep down, I knew this wasn't just about a house anymore. It was a public war, and my mother had just fired her first shot. Family drama plays well on Facebook. By the next morning, my phone was lighting up like a Christmas tree, pings, tags, and messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. I didn't even have to open the notifications to know what it was about. Mom's statement had gone viral. The Lakewood Chronicle had run an exclusive follow-up interview with her, complete with a flattering portrait and a headline that read, "Heartbroken Mother Betrayed by Her Own Daughter." The article was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation. She'd told them she was blindsided, that I seized the family home out of spite, and that I used her misfortune to elevate myself financially. She even threw in a quote about forgiving me through prayer, which sounded exactly like something she'd say when cameras were rolling. By noon, the online comments had turned into a war zone. Ungrateful witch. How could you do that to your parents? Imagine treating the people who raised you like tenants. She's disgusting, I'd disown her too. But buried between the vitriol were quieter voices, the kind that didn't shout but cut deeper. Some of us had to choose peace over parents too. She probably saved the house herself and isn't getting credit. As a single mom, I get it. People only see one side. I stared at those messages longer than I meant to. Anonymous words from strangers who somehow understood everything I couldn't say out loud. Jake showed up at my office around 4, holding 2 coffees and an expression somewhere between concern and fury. "You're trending," he said, and not in a good way. I forced a hollow laugh. "Great. Maybe I'll finally get that influencer deal and evict your parents' challenge." He didn't smile. "Claire, I know this hurts, but don't engage. People feed on outrage. Let it die down." I looked at him, my voice quieter now. "You've seen the comments, haven't you?" He nodded. "Yeah, but I've also seen worse things blow over. And you have something they don't want, the truth." He set his coffee down and pulled a folder from his briefcase. "Speaking of which, there's something you should know." My stomach tightened. "What now?" Jake opened the file and handed me a form, one I recognized immediately. It was a purchase interest request. The address at the top made my pulse skip. 418 Bellevue Drive. "What is this?" I asked. He hesitated. "Another party reached out this morning, asking if the property was available for secondary acquisition. They want to buy it outright." "Who?" he exhaled. "Your dad's former business partner, Mark Hensley." I stared at the name until it blurred. Mark, the same man who'd convinced Dad to refinance in the first place, the one who'd promised fast returns and vanished when things went south. "Jake," I said slowly, "if Mark's trying to buy the house, it's not out of kindness." He nodded grimly. "I know, which means your family's mess just got bigger." I sank into my chair, my phone still buzzing beside me, another wave of comments, notifications, and judgment from a world that didn't know the truth. Mom had started a PR war, and now someone else was trying to cash in on the wreckage. Every key was out of tune, just like us. The living room felt smaller than I remembered, though maybe it was just the silence. Dust hung in the air, catching in the light that streamed through half-closed blinds. I stood there, staring at the piano, my piano sitting where it always had, against the far wall beneath Grandma's portrait. The ivory keys were cracked, the varnish dulled, a faint ring of water stains circling the top where someone had rested a mug. I ran my fingers across the keys, pressing one gently. It groaned instead of sang. Dad appeared in the doorway, rubbing the back of his neck. "Didn't think you'd come back so soon," he said softly. "I just wanted to pick up a few things," I said, my voice flat. "Childhood stuff, keepsakes." He nodded slowly. Your mother's out with the church ladies. Probably for the best. I opened the small cabinet beside the piano, the one that used to hold sheet music and Grandma's old jewelry box, the one she'd promised me when I was little. It was gone. Where is it? I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. Dad's eyes dropped. We had to sell some things, Claire. Just until we could figure out the bills. My heart thudded. You sold Grandma's jewelry? He sighed, guilt flickering across his face. I didn't want to, but your mother insisted. Said sentimental value doesn't pay mortgages. I turned back to the piano, pressing another key. This one broken completely. She really said that? She said a lot of things lately. He paused, voice heavy. You know she's hurting too, right? I laughed bitterly. Hurting people don't post interviews. They heal quietly. He didn't answer. The air between us filled with the sound of my shallow breathing and the faint hum of the refrigerator, the same one that once held birthday cakes and leftover casseroles after Sunday dinners. Dad, I said softly, did you ever think about what this house really costs? He looked up, confused. It's where I learned to love, and where I learned I wasn't enough, I said. Maybe we should have lost it years ago. His expression crumpled, but I couldn't stay to fix it. I took one last look at the piano, the walls, the fragments of a life that used to feel permanent, then turned to leave. Outside, Mrs. Yates was watering her roses next door. She looked up, her sharp gray eyes softening when she saw me. Didn't take much, did you? She asked. Just a few memories, I said. Good, she replied, because memories weigh less than guilt. I almost smiled. You always know what to say. She winked. Old age makes you blunt. Keeps the liars nervous. That night, after Eli went to bed, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Mrs. Yates holding a small cloth-wrapped bundle. Found this in your parents' trash, she said, handing it over. I unwrapped it slowly. Inside was the jewelry box, mahogany, scratched, engraved faintly with my initials, CW. My breath caught. They threw it away? Mrs. Yates nodded grimly. Guess some things are too heavy for them to carry. I ran my thumb over the initials, a mix of sadness and quiet relief flooding me. Thank you. She gave me a small, knowing smile. Darlin', some people bury what's precious when they're ashamed of what's broken. You, on the other hand, Yig. When she left, I sat at the kitchen table, the box resting in my lap. Inside, a few trinkets remained. A brooch, an old ring, and one folded piece of paper. In Grandma's delicate handwriting, faded but clear, were 4 words. Don't lose yourself, Claire. The piano was broken, the family fractured, the love long gone. But sitting there, I realized I hadn't lost myself after all. And for the first time in years, I didn't need music to feel whole. I wasn't hosting a sale, I was hosting a reckoning. The morning of the open house, sunlight streamed through spotless windows, glinting off polished floors that hadn't gleamed this bright since before the fights, and the debt and the silence. The air smelled of fresh paint, lavender, and new beginnings. Every corner had been staged with intention, warm lamps, quiet music, the illusion of peace. Jake walked beside me, clipboard in hand, his tie slightly crooked. You sure you're ready for this? He asked. I smiled faintly. Ready's not the word, but it's happening either way. We'd invited half the community, local business owners, church families, even the mayor's assistant, to see the property that had become both a battleground and a redemption story. Flyers said, open house, modern family living with classic charm. What they didn't say was that the woman running it once slept in the guest room after being disowned. The guests began to arrive around noon. Voices filled the rooms, laughter echoing through the same halls that had once been filled with arguments and quiet judgments. Everyone admired the renovations, the restored brick fireplace, the gleaming kitchen counters, the way I'd turned the dusty piano corner into a reading nook. Then I saw them, Mom and Dad. Standing at the doorway, they were unsure if they were welcome. Mom's posture was stiff, her pearls back in place like armor. Dad held his hat in both hands, eyes darting everywhere except at me. Jake noticed too, lowering his voice. You want me to handle this? No, I said quietly. This part's mine. I walked toward them, each step heavier than the last. Didn't expect to see you here, I said. Mom's gaze swept across the room, her voice tight. We heard the community was invited. We didn't realize we needed an invitation to our own home. It's not yours anymore, I said gently, though the words felt strange on my tongue. But you're welcome to look around. Dad nodded slowly, almost gratefully, and wandered toward the living room. Mom stayed rooted, her eyes tracing every new detail, every touch she hadn't approved. When she saw the mantelpiece, she froze. Resting in the center, beneath a framed photo of our family from happier years, was Dad's old watch, the one that no longer ticked, now cleaned and set atop a restored wooden base. Mom's voice broke slightly. You kept it. I did, I said. It reminded me that time runs out unless you fix what's broken. She didn't respond. Her eyes glistened, but her pride wouldn't let the tears fall. Guests moved through the house, complimenting everything. Such a lovely home. You really turned this place around. Each word was a quiet victory. Every compliment felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. By the end of the event, people were leaving business cards, asking about leases, and shaking my hand. I smiled for photos, answered questions, and thanked them all for coming. When the last guest stepped out, Jake closed his folder, glancing down at his phone. You should probably sit for this, he said. I frowned. What now? He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. The investors who were backing the mortgage just pulled out. The loan's been cleared. I blinked, confused. What does that mean? It means, he said with a slow grin, you own the house free and clear. No debts, no liens. No one else is holding the strings. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I looked around at the walls, the windows, the newly restored mantel. The air felt lighter, almost sacred. Behind me, Mom stood quietly in the doorway, still watching. She didn't know yet. But soon, she'd find out that the daughter she'd once dismissed as a liability now owned every brick, every inch, every memory of the house she worshipped. Jake leaned closer, his voice barely a whisper. It's all yours, Claire. I exhaled, a shaky smile breaking through. For years, I'd been treated like I didn't belong here. But now, for the first time, this house and the life inside it finally belonged to me. Maybe the house wasn't what needed saving after all. 3 months later, the Whitman residence wasn't listed in any property records. It had a new name carved into the sign by the front steps. The Bellevue Center for Single Parents. What used to be my childhood home had become a place where other people could start over. The living room where my mother once judged me now held shelves of donated toys. The dining room, where silence used to taste bitter, was now a coffee nook filled with laughter. And the kitchen smelled of casseroles again. Only this time they were made by volunteers who knew what it meant to struggle and still show up anyway. Eli ran through the hallways, laughing, his sneakers squeaking on the polished floors. He'd help hand out snacks, proudly introducing me as my mom, the boss of this place. Every time he said it, I felt something inside me heal a little more. We hosted workshops, parenting circles, and small community dinners. Jake helped with the legal paperwork, and Mrs. Yates became our unofficial grandma-in-residence, greeting every visitor like family. The house buzzed with the kind of life it never had before. Humble, honest, messy, real. One afternoon, as the sun poured in through the big front windows, I saw 2 familiar figures standing hesitantly at the gate. My parents. They looked older somehow. Less proud, more human. Mom was holding a plate of cookies, Dad a folded newspaper under his arm. Eli spotted them first. Grandma! Grandpa! He shouted, sprinting toward them. Mom knew instinctively, arms open, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't hesitate. She hugged him tight, tears spilling down her cheeks. When she stood up, her gaze met mine through the doorway. There was no pretense this time, no pearls or posture to hide behind, just quiet remorse. This place, she said softly, looking around, it's beautiful. You made it mean something again. I nodded, unable to find the right words. She hesitated, then whispered, We should have helped you when you needed us. For a moment, I just stared at her, unsure how to respond. Then I smiled, small but real. You're helping now, I said. That's enough. Inside, above the fireplace where the broken watch still sat, hung a framed photo. 3 generations, my parents, me, and Eli. Not perfect, not polished, but together. The title underneath read simply, Restored. As they sat down with Eli to share cookies, I stepped outside and looked at the house, its white paint glowing softly in the afternoon light. It no longer looked like a monument to pride. It looked like a beginning. Maybe it was never the house that needed saving. Maybe it was us. Sometimes saving the house means rebuilding the people inside it. Take a moment to like and subscribe. If you've ever been underestimated, your story deserves to be told. I would love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there.